Welcome to the first podcast from Nomad Town, and today we'll be talking about S.T.O.P. I'm Marcus Petz, and joining me today is
Nettle Petz.
Thank you, and welcome for coming to this podcast. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what Nomad Town is, and we'll explain the global context of where Nomad Town has come from and where it's going. And we hope to talk about the objectives of what we want to achieve, not only with Nomad Town, but also the S.T.O.P technology.
I am very intrigued to learn about S.T.O.P and Nomad Town. I've met Huck, and he's a very good man.
That's the man who has been the main leader in getting the S.T.O.P project off the ground, and now it's ready to extend to a wider field through Global Citizenship Education, which we shall explain as well. So without further ado, I want to tell you a little bit about Nomad Town. So Nomad Town is rooted in the idea of nomadology. That means we're as transient as the dust and the wind. Nomads are known from many cultures in the past. Perhaps you've heard nomads mostly with the Mongolians and their yurts, their nomadic culture. And transhumance, which is another form of nomadism, is also quite common, particularly when you thought of bringing sheep or cows from summer pastures high in the mountains and then bringing them down again as winter neared and the weather was inclement. So the shepherds and the herders would move down the mountains into valley sheltered areas, taking the animals with them. That's still found to some extent, but with modern technology, we don't have so much transhumance as we used to have. Anyway, back to Nomad Town. It's found near Joensuu in Karelia, which is in Finland. And Karelian culture is famous for giving the spiritual origin through myths and legends, which have been transferred by traditional runo singing, of much of the Finnish ways of being. But aside from these romantic cultural origins, the practical land-using Finno-Ugaric rural culture can be split into two broad strains. So we have today the Sami people, who you might know as the Lapps, and their culture is a nomadic culture still, and it's based on reindeer herding. And the other culture strain that I referred to is farming, and you find that more in the south of Finland, and it's more of a forest-based agricultural way of living. Perhaps you could say agroforestry. If you looked in the past, there was an element of slash and burn, of forests being cleared and people moving on through all of Finland and Sweden. And famous paintings depict this way of life. But now it's much more settled and tends to be farming. And if you even think of the growing of trees, trees are effectively farmed. It's not wild forests anymore. Anyway, Nomad Town straddles these ways of existing by being part of the association Sydänlanka, which is Heartthread, and they aim to capture rural skills. Those are the skills that people have learned to live in the countryside, how to thrive and survive there. Green skills, and these are more sustainability skills, so there's a lot of overlap there, but they're not exactly the same. So a green skill might also be how you can generate electricity in a sustainable way, which wouldn't necessarily be a rural skill, and just broader country living. So that includes foraging as well as low impact technologies. And really that's what Nomad Town is aiming to achieve. But I need to give some kind of context for where Nomad Town fits. So we are motivated that we have to really think about how we change our way of living.
So, Nomad Town is pretty interesting, and I like the origin story. Thank you, Marcus, for telling me. So I want to get in a little bit of S.T.O.P. It's pretty new to me, but I've heard it before, and I think some of the pictures might have Huck in it because he is the one who made Nomad Town. But anyway, I would like to ask you some questions, Marcus.
Please do.
So, when Huck first introduced this Nomad Town, how did you react?
Well, I reacted very positively, and this again comes to why he did it. So Nomad Town, coming from nomadology, was also quite connected to the various movements we've had in the past, such as intentional communities and eco-villages. But the aim of Nomad Town is more than that. It's to be a resilience hub. So resilience hubs are ways of exploring and experimenting to develop resilience at the bioregional level. And these will interact locally, the emphasis being on the act. They will do stuff, but they will hopefully reach out to build a global resilience through connections and connectors. So we link those originally in one bioregion. So if we think of what a bioregion is, if we think of a watershed where all the water flows from a valley into a river, that's what a bioregion is. And we can think of organizing ourselves as a human society on a bioregional basis, perhaps interacting with other bioregions, but focused on the bioregion, as opposed to only globally. So it's a beginning of a nested hierarchy of ecology, which goes from one location to several connected projects, bioregionally and then globally, rather than thinking about globalization as being the point that we want to be working from. And this reflects very much on something called donut economics. Donut economics is a way of saying we have limits to what we can actually live on, ecological limits to living on the planet. We must adapt our lifestyles to live within those limits. So that requires us to think about where are the boundaries, and the boundaries have been summarized as 8-9 key things that we cannot cross of use of resources. And there's been an attempt to map those to the human values, if you like, or the social logical aspects, and they're put in a circle, and this is called donut economics. So this podcast isn't so much about donut economics, but that's informing the reasoning behind having a nomad town and trying to live in a low impact way. So who's doing this? Well, there's a bunch of people around the world, and we are called Earth Regenerators, and we're working to make these things manifest in local projects and scale these to achieve a global transformation. So Nomad Town is sharing technologies with and from other Earth Regenerators.
Thank you for telling me, Marcus, about it. You actually answered one of my questions. I was about to say that why did Huck create S.T.O.P and what is the meaning behind it? But I guess we got those out of the way. But my second question would be, how did you become a part of this society, and when did you first meet Huck?
Well, my personal journey, if you like, to becoming connected with S.T.O.P began with Extinction Rebellion, and people connecting to say, well, we've got to do something, let's do something active. And that was very demonstration based. I believe you've done some demonstrations around climate.
Yes, I have actually gone to climate change, skipped school, and I've gone to there and I've held up signs, and my sign said, save the earth or else Baldy will get you.
So Baldy being a character who is the role of a maths teacher who admonishes children for not doing what they should do within the system, the school system. And we felt this was a good way to represent telling people that they should do something different. So yeah, school striker for you there. And I'm also a bit of a radical activist, and this is what's got us thinking that we need to do more than just politics, and to move beyond politics we need to find a way to actually manifest a realistic solution. And Nomad Town could well be that solution. So Huck and I connected through various connections, if you like, both literally, as in computer and telephone, and also connections in the sense of being connected to groups such as Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion, Greenpeace, Luontoliitto is the Nature League here in Finland. And we talked a lot about how we could develop this project, Huck being the main driver of the project. However, it is a community of people, and you could say the mission of Nomad Town is to offer a space for reflection, experimentation, but also for actually living resiliently within the bioregion as a demonstration to be copied. So we want it to be copied It aims to promote appropriate technology transfer from outside into Nomad Town. We'll have a look at some of those, such as the social technology, a little bit later, and also externally. So it's hoped that if the Resilience Hub and Nomad Town works, that Nomad Town actually can be nomadic and remove itself from Joensuu and move to another place. Having arrived in another place, it would be a living laboratory and show people how to actually live in another way. Would you be excited to visit it, Nettle?
Yes, I would be very excited to visit it. But thank you for answering my questions. If I became a part of it, which I will probably become a part of it because my dad is a part of it, I will be very excited to do Nomad Town, and I can't wait to join everyone on it. So, if you have anything else to say, Mark, you could say.
Yeah, so let's step back a little bit and think, why did we think it was a good time now to start Nomad Town? And we have increased stress on our systems. We have shocks and societal unrest, and we've often had these, but we have more and more natural disasters. But I put natural in inverted commas because any disaster, of course, is man plus a scenario. So it's not a disaster if nobody's there or if people can cope with a stressy situation. So it's a disaster when you have a burning building and nobody escapes. But if everybody escapes and the fire brigade come and put the fire out, it doesn't become a disaster. Unfortunately, on a global scale, there is no fire brigade to come and put out the fires that we've started with global heating. So there we have to look at alternatives. And we have a growing awareness in crisis management through projects and possible pathways that we could do different things. So we need to make a strength, weaknesses and opportunities and tactics analysis, a SWOT analysis, and then we might find a preferred pathway. But then we have an issue. It's a dynamic situation. So to go through such a lengthy process as a proper level and proper assessment is quite complicated. And at the end of it, it may be that you need to then take the process again. So it's very difficult to think, what should we do? Well, the stress means we are in a survival situation. And we have to then think, well, what should we do? Should we prioritize rural resilience over urban smart technology? Should we leave for outer space? Maybe we can go to the moon or we can go to another planet. How about ocean homesteading? What if we were to build underneath the waves to make ourselves modern Jacques Cousteau, but actually live there permanently? Or how about intentional communities? Eco-villages seem to offer some solutions, and there are many people in eco-villages and transition towns that say, well, this is the answer. Well, there's a lot of confusion about what needs to be done. And at the community level, at the individual level, we need a modus operandi. We need a way of evaluating and what could we do? What could we use? So this led us to think about S.T.O.P as a solution. Now, S.T.O.P has been started by a very few number of people, and there's only a few of us that have been involved so far. But if you are genuinely interested, are you genuinely interested?
Yes, I am genuinely interested about S.T.O.P.
Then we have to think about how you could take part. Now, humans need community in a survival situation, as we all have different skill sets. Also, humans function best in small bands. If we look at our nearest relatives, the baboons or the gorillas or chimpanzees, they work in small groups. Small tribes and bands is where humans came from, and that works quite well for us. We also have different life stages which need different aspects of care. So being a hermit or totally individual can only work for a certain group of people as adults. They have to be reasonably fit and healthy. They can't have any children. They can't have dependents. So that's quite stressy and difficult. So how do we form a community and how does it interact? Well, there's much history of intentional communities of different kinds, but also villages. We mustn't forget villages. So villages have existed a very long time, and they're a proven social technology. They've worked for millennia. They've worked much longer than cities, and we know that a village can function. So Nomad Town, small community, village, small community, maybe that's something that can work, and we would like to showcase that. So we would like people to come and live that reality. So you can do that. You can support us by coming to our courses, and we do various courses on different aspects that touch Nomad Town. Or you can invite us to visit you, and some of us can come there and share our wisdom and learn from your wisdom, from your situations. And you can even come and live for a while in Nomad Town. We have a number of places that you could stay, or you could build your own shelter, or you can bring something with you. We would discuss this with you. But then you would learn how our culture operates, how our lived reality is. And the best way to contact us is to either email Huck, HUCK, .middeke @gmail.com. That's huck.middeke@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Facebook, or you can find us on Sydänlanka blogspot.com, Nomad Town. So if you do a search in Google, you should find that. And if not, we're able to give you the details at some point. And lastly, if you really want to give us money, if you really, really want to give us money, we wouldn't say no to that, but we would say talk to us first about this, because we're not appealing for just loads of cash. We want to build a culture, and we would want you to be participative in some way if you were going to give us money, and we would want to talk about how the money is most usefully used.
Thank you for telling me. I would like to be in this community, and I would actually like to live there with you, Marcus. So I wonder if I ever experience going out and just see Huck, because I'm in Nomad Town. I think it's a very interesting name, and there's some books you could buy if you want it.
Yeah, there are lots of books that would connect with what we've done, even though we try to keep the wisdom as a living wisdom in the people. We're not ignorant of written literature or other people's experiences. So you might wonder where S.T.O.P has come from. So I described it as a social technology. So we have many social technologies, and social technologies could be something such as a group in a school. You could talk of a social technology as a way you make agreements or have a conversation. These are very basic social technologies. But this particular social technology, it was taken from prepper or survivalist practices. So preppers are people that are preparing for a disaster or a crisis in advance. So it's a bit like learning first aid and having a first aid kit sitting there. That's prepping. That's prepping for an accident that might happen. But preppers can prep for extreme possibilities like a pandemic. They can prep for a fire, forest fire coming and burning everything down, or other disasters. And preppers don't necessarily prep for living in a wild situation, but quite often they have the concept of bugging out and living away from mainstream civilization and society. So that's what a prepper is, but it's also mixed in with survivalism. So survivalism would be if you were in such a disaster situation, say you were on a ship and it sank at sea, or you're washed up on a desert island, what are you going to live off? How are you going to survive?
Sand.
Or, well, sand, but you need the food as well, you need some water and some shelter. So this is a survivalist. It's very often connected with bushcraft, which is also connected with camping. So all of these groups of people have a very practical approach to life, finding problems and challenges and overcoming them. So we took S.T.O.P as a short mnemonic, which is a way to remember, S.T.O.P, and an individual can use that to evaluate if they're meeting their survival priorities in a situation. So they stop and they think, they look at the opportunities and they make a plan on how to deal with it. So let's say you're walking through the forest and you're lost. You don't keep walking through the forest, you stop, and then you think, and then you realise, well, I'm right-handed, so every time I've been past a tall place, I've always gone the same way around the building and I've ended up coming in a circle. Okay, so what's my opportunities? Well, my opportunity is to next time go on the left side. and then I won't walk in a circle, I'll walk in a straight line. If I walk in a straight line, I'm quite close to civilization. So that's my plan. And then you carry the plan out and you would find that you got out of that survival situation. You survived it. So that's where STOP came from originally. But it's also got a psychological element, and it aims to cover the basics needed to survive. That's where STOP came from.
So that was very interesting about STOP. But about those groups, if you combine those groups together, it's me, the Scouts. Yes, I joined in the Scouts, and they have teach us about how to tent, how to camp. I've gone camping with them in the winter, not in the summer. In the
Where
winter.
did you stay?
Well, we stayed at this very expensive scout trip where you have to put tents out and some cabins there for the very young kids who don't know anything. But we weren't the young kids; we were the older kids, so we had to. Yeah, no. And I've gone camping before with my dad. Then our grandfather once, at 5 years old, bought us a tent, and we went in the woods and the mountains, and we just slept there. And I was like, what if the bears come? What if the tigers come? And my grandfather said, why would there be tigers in Finland? Why wouldn't there be in a zoo? But anyways, that's the subject.
So as you see, my daughter has started to learn some of these skills of survival, and the Scouts is an excellent organisation for teaching that mindset. However, having the mindset in a group reveals that an evaluation must be systematic, it must be frequent and considered. So outside of the Scouts, how do you do that at a community level? Well, you can use a number of social technologies. You can use a warm data lab to get a number of different perspectives. So you have children's and adults' perspectives, and you have people in different expertise coming together. World Cafe is another, or People's Assembly, the Focus Conversation, Citizens Assembly, commoner councils, partition units are ways of managing land and managing people's interaction with the land. Parliaments, perhaps, is a bigger social technology. And then associations. So all these are different organisations that have humans in common, and how humans can collectively decide to do something and consider some options. So we could have taken any of those techniques, but we decided that we would repurpose STOP for a community level tool. And we do this as full moon, full stop. So hashtag full moon, full stop. And you can find this in Twitter, and you can read some of the things that people have done at the full moon, full stop. And we decided we would do this at different levels, and we would link it at times having a general stop, so you cover whatever priorities or issues might arise, and then we might have thematic evaluations. So one stop may be focused on food culture, for example, and then we would consider what our opportunities for food were, whether we should have some small-scale agroforestry, whether we should be foraging, how we should store the food, and we would explore something like that in a stop session. So it's quite flexible. So how do I summarize full moon, full stop in a nutshell? Well, it's an all-day event with thinking and reflection built in. So it's a slow, idler type of culture. It's not structured like a lecture or any kind of formal learning. It's what you might call non-formal learning, with some aspects of informal learning mixed in as well. So that means that we may have planned the aspects that are happening that are non-formal. So we've planned that we're going to talk about food. We've perhaps brought some experts along. They can talk about foraging. They can take us on some foraging walks. So that would be non-formal. It's not that they're going to do a lecture on foraging and then we follow the lecture and we go out. No, they talk about, they don't know what they're going to find. They don't know who's going to turn up. It's very flexible for the situations and conditions we find. That would be non-formal learning. And then informal learning would just be, for example, when we sit around the campfire and we've cooked some food and people start talking, and something might happen that people then talk about. Maybe we found something interesting in the forest. Maybe there's somebody's come and made an offer for something that can support Nomad Town. So as a result, we would then talk about those aspects. That would be non-formal learning. So there's a mixture and a balance between how much informal and non-formal we do. It's very important it must be fun. So we want a culture of festivalism with food and drink. And this is quite important for learning. If you're going to learn about something, then you want to know that you've got enough victuals, that people aren't hungry or thirsty or wandering off because they need to eat something. So we plan that in to the way that we do full moon, full stop. And there's some history in this. In Finland, we have something called a talcott. Have you heard of a talcott, Nettle?
I don't think I have. Even though I'm from Finland, I'm not very sure I have heard of it.
Okay, well, a talcott, usually in Finland you find, is done as a yard talcott now, a piha talcott. And what it might be is there's a task that needs to be done by everyone. So let's say you've got to clean the yard this year, plant a few trees and plants, make it a bit pretty. So to do that talcott, somebody arranges food and people all work together collectively. It can be done for another person, but usually it's done as a community level thing. But it's very important that food is part of it, and people just give of themselves to get the task done. They work collectively. There are many similar traditions, dugnad in Norway, for example, and it's found in other countries as well. So that's influenced our development of STOP. We want it open to all voices. So there isn't a hierarchy there. We want very much to get wisdom from children, from men, from women, and even nature is allowed to speak. There might be moments of pause, or there might be just things that we notice in the nature as we look around that reveal itself as something that nature wants to have dealt with. So these are all possible to bring into STOP.
And animals, like my little cat.
Yeah, there's dogs and cats sometimes appear in Nomad Town, as well as wild animals. And lastly, we want STOP to be action-oriented. We don't just want sitting around and talking around a campfire and everybody goes off again saying, well, that was interesting. It isn't to replace television. It isn't a substitute for having the radio on. So we want it oriented towards identifying what works well and what could be improved. However, having said that, paradoxically, it may be indeterminate. We may decide to do something or just to discuss it as part of a co-creative process. So this is built in, this idea. For example, if I talk about shelters, we have a number of different shelters. We have some army tents, we've had a yurt, had a teepee, and most recently we've got a kota. So kota is the traditional tent, if you like, one of the tents that you find with the Sami people. And we've been making new poles and trying to treat the poles so that we can have the kota as a place that people can sit in and share wisdom. Now, at the same time, we also want to be low impact. So when we look at the yurt that we have, we start to question it and say, well, it works, it is quite low impact, but then again, it's not fully cotton. So it has some polyester in it. Or if it was fully cotton, the cotton has come from America. So there's an impact in that. It's not made out of, for example, nettle. You could use nettles and you could make nettle rope and you can make nettle cloth. It's very strong, grows in Finland. But nobody really does that anymore. But it would be nice to see nettle used a little bit more often.
Hey, that's me! How dare you use my cousins?
Yeah, so maybe that we would just discuss that rather than actually make a purpose of. But next time there might be more thought on it. Perhaps somebody has met someone or a thought has brewed in a mind and somebody knows somebody that would like to experimentally make some nettle cloth. And then we could try making it. So this is what we want to do. And we often make recordings of what we explored so we can share the wisdom. So let's talk now exactly what STOP is. So STOP, S-T-O-P. The S stands for stop, sit down, go on strike. Just don't carry on doing what you were doing. You have to make that pause. Now, if we maybe don't know what to do and how to do it, doing nothing for one day every month can be a good start. The full moon marks a global and neutral event for reflection once a month. It's true that some calendars are based on the full moon, and this has led to their religions or their cultures of the people that have those calendars being shaped on the full moon. In fact, many of us had this in the past. If we go back deeply in time, we were all affected by the moon because we all came out of the sea, and our bodies are still affected by the moon and the flow of the tides within us. And this is actually a good reason for having a stop on a monthly basis, because it accords with the natural cycle. So it's better to do things that accord with the natural cycle than try to subvert it or break them. Your body will naturally have hormonal changes, and hormonal changes can benefit by being worked with and rather than against. So yeah, stop, sit down, go on strike. And That's the first part of it. And then
T, tank and shank and sink.
thank and think.
Yeah, sorry, I have something. T and
Gratitude.
gratitude open the mind for positive thinking. We think about our 6 survival
Priorities.
food, water, air, shelter, health, community, and
Evaluate.
if these are covered in a truly sustainably way. Survival situation, yes or no?
So by asking that question, we think what we've got and we're thankful for it. So we have a yurt that's covering us, so we can be thankful for that. Well, we don't have a yurt, so we're missing shelter. And then we have to think, well, what should we do for shelter? We can cut down the trees and make a shelter, but then we don't have any trees anymore. Maybe we want some trees. So we would think about this and we would think, well, what do we have?
Cardboard!
When it comes to the other, so have we got food? Where can we get food? And then we can evaluate this as if it's a survival situation, yes or no. This is a little bit more deep than it appears superficially. So it can be that we have food, but the food may have come from money, and it may have come from money that we've bought from a supermarket. So it isn't really sustainable. And in a survival situation, you're not going to be able to go to the supermarket to buy food because the supermarkets will be shut. It's rather like saying, well, I can always go to a restaurant, and then we find the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic hit us, and in that corona time, the restaurants were closed. For those people that couldn't cook their own food, they were pretty stuck. They were cast into a survival situation. And the idea is to see that we're not cast into a survival situation and that we're resilient as possible. So if we thought about just food, for example, we may well think, well, what could we eat? Now, living in Finland, in the early part of the year, korvasieni were eaten because they're one of the first things that grew. Now, this false morel mushroom is very poisonous. So it has to be boiled and tipped water away, boiled, tipped water away, boiled, tipped water away, and then there's still a residual poison, but you can eat it. And the poison only will build up after 60, 70 years. So for most people, it doesn't become an issue. I would still not eat it, but that would be the way that you could think about survival situation. That doesn't mean you always have to eat those mushrooms, but you would be aware in a situation where you had to eat something that that's what you could eat. And if we should carry the same out with the other priorities, we would look at the food, as I said, we would look at water, so clean, drinkable water is quite essential. Air for breathing, shelter. Again, you can make rough shelters. The very simplest shelter can be what's called a laavu, which is just a lean-to, some sticks or one sheet that's turned to the wind. And this is in fact how gypsy people used to live, only about 100 years ago, so not so long ago. Health. So this is both psychological health as well as physical health. And community. Community is very important for supporting us if we have issues, such as we're injured or if we need to move to another location. So it is an important thing to think about community. The one thing that we don't include in this, which you might wonder about, is electricity. Is electricity a thing that is a survival priority or not? As it happens in Nomad Town, we do use electricity. We have some solar panels, but we don't believe it's a survival priority. You don't have to have electricity to survive, but it starts to be something that you need for modern society. And lastly, we have
O, and then we have P. I think I can.
So
Imagine.
O is to observe. You're getting ahead of yourself there, Nettle. Is to observe, to orientate, but mostly look at the options and opportunities. So what can we do? After we've thought about things, we've highlighted issues, we don't have good shelter. So what are the possibilities? What can we adopt? What can we adapt or develop or share and to deal with those situations? So Nomad Town, very romantically, I've described it as being in the middle of a forest with lots of nice things around. But some of those nice things are legacy things. We have abandoned villages, so we have some old buildings which we can cannibalise. But if we were to transport Nomad Town into a city, which Huck has done himself and sited it once in the middle of the Joensuu marketplace, and then he looks around, he had to think about the options for existing in that situation. So he brought lots of stuff with him, and he made a camp that functioned. So that was an opportunity to interact with other people and to develop Nomad Town with the passers-by and the people in the market. Lastly, of stop, we have P or plan. So be positive. The Dalai Lama says happiness is the way. And very much this Eastern philosophy of happiness economics, about thinking of well-being and values over money, which are proxies for those values, which quickly forgets in money relations values themselves. We can choose a happiness, we can choose a positivity, and we can dramatically increase our chances of survival. If you're doom and gloom and you think things won't succeed, you become anxious and wrapped up in yourself, and a negative spiral can develop. But if you think positively, no matter what's happening, then you're more likely to increase your chances of survival. So we partly do this by only planning for the next short period. So if we only plan for a short period, goals are much more achievable. So that's not to say that Nomad Town doesn't make longer term plans, or Sydänlanka doesn't make longer term plans. We do, but stop this technology is only a short term planning technique. So we make it for the next month. And that way we're likely to achieve the goals because we won't be overly ambitious with our goals. They're realistic and they're immediate. But yeah, happiness is quite important. So are we in a survival situation? Yes, we are. We're in a survival situation, not just because of climate or ecological collapse. Those are major aspects, but because our population has grown so big that we are absorbing more and more of the world, and it makes it difficult for us to survive as we are now without changing some things. However, if we start to think globally, we have to think about how we consider everybody who is on the globe. And this is something called Global Citizenship Education. And STOP does connect into Global Citizenship Education because we want to not only have STOP operating in a remote field in Joensuu, we also want STOP to reach wider. We want it to reach across the bioregion, we want it to reach to other bioregions, and we want to share the wisdom around the earth. So we do that through Earth Regenerators. So this is a group that's been started by Joe Brewer, who is based in Colombia. He's an American, and he's been working with a number of projects to try and allow them to demonstrate different technologies, social technologies, new economies, more sustainable ways of living lightly on the earth, a whole range of stuff. So we want to connect him with that, and we do connect him with that. Here in Finland, we have the Sustainable Change Network. And such was founded last year in Helsinki and involves some people from Sweden, some people from Britain, and a few others. And there, academically, things are explored in greater depth. And we hope that our social technologies can be looked at and can be shared through that network and can be relocated and repurposed, as well as we can learn from other people doing things, which such in fact includes also in the Joensuu region in eastern Finland, in Karelia. We have a number of other possibilities that we can connect with. We have a school which is working in very much like the folk high school way of Denmark, and they are looking at how people can be taught the skills for growing their own food, making their own shelters. We're partnering with them. There are a number of other groups that we partner with through such. There is Extinction Rebellion, who I've mentioned before, but this is quite a large organisation spread around the world. And one particular part of it, global resilience, is trying to work with individual locations and individual projects. So there are projects in Peru, Portugal, and of course us here in Finland, and we will share with those projects and spread our knowledge around. So we have a development aspect there, and we're working through a piece of software which is being developed to help facilitate that, which is not from us. It's called We Serve, and that's available for other projects to use for free to help people develop their projects. So that's what we've been doing so far. We also want to link with other groups and other possibilities. So we've been exploring Samuel Forrest Technology, who is looking at a number of different thematic ways of living in a more sustainable way. This includes the forests and how to live in the forest existence, how to live in villages and how village technology works. And so those touch us very closely, but there are other aspects there. So we want to keep that connection. There are also the bushcraft people. So we've been working with the Tampere Bushcraft in English group, which is in another city from Joensuu. But there we explore things of a practical nature, which has included how to fish, how to start fire, and it's basically a group of men that go into the forest and to get things to eat or build shelters. But we are quite international with that group. So we have people from Britain, we have people from Finland, we also have Japanese members. So they come along and they share their wisdom from their different cultures. And we are open to linking with other people that share our views or interest in what we've been doing. So that's where we've been doing global citizenship education. But what actually is it? Well, it's based on 3 domains of learning. So they are cognitive, which is the knowledge and thinking skills to better understand the world and its complexities. So we have that where we consider what we've done and we try to share that knowledge. Then we have the social emotional, which is the values and the social skills. So this is quite strong with us. We want people to understand what rural culture is and how rural culture functions. So we're sharing that. Then there's psychosocially or behaviorally, and this starts to be the practical actions that we are taking. So we are doing practical things. People are learning, for example, how to make pitch, how to make other shelters, how to make food, are quite simple things that other people have done. But then we're also learning how the technology works for putting a community together, or how we actually can be nomadic and how we could take what we've developed elsewhere. So we have things like bike workshops. We use things like Fresnel lenses to think about how we use our energy and our energy options. We start to consider older technologies such as food storage in ice houses or underground storages and fermentation. So there's a range of stuff we do that's actually behavioural. So we hope to share that and we hope to learn from that. So who's doing this? Who is S.T.O.P? Well, Huck is one of the main people, and Huck's the nomad in chief, if you like. And myself, I'm the scientific coordinator. And lastly, there's Jussi Tinkonen, who's brought the things together from the Sydänlanka Association, and he's helped us to structure things and administer them and bring people from other places to run workshops. So those are the main people with this particular project. But of course, there are many people that are involved in making S.T.O.P a success. Sydänlanka is a rural association and it's done a number of different projects with different groups. So this is just one project of Sydänlanka, and other project possibilities exist. The project itself has been financially supported by Bridge 47. So this is a global citizenship education network here in Europe that's being coordinated by Fingo. So Fingo is a platform for global development organizations, and there are a few thousand of those in Finland who work on all sorts of development projects, a lot of them being overseas development or official development assistance type projects that work in Africa and Asia, for example. So this is something that they hope will happen from other collaborators in Bridge 47. The Global Resilience team of Extinction Rebellion is supporting us with we serve and some knowledge. And overall, Bridge 47 and Fingo and the funding can be traced back to the European Union. So they've funded this project to some extent. And the Commission's Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development, the DG DevCo, which is the end source of the money, if you like, if you don't go back further to the taxpayer, and they have a development, education and awareness raising program, which is called DEA, and this is part of DEA. So thank you to those collaborators, and thank you very much for listening to this podcast, and I hope soon you'll come back and hear us in another podcast. So it's goodbye from me.
And it was very nice to meet you. Bye from Nettle Petz.